Hello, my name is Christopher Sands and I'm a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. I'm here today to talk a little bit about the Waxman-Markey bill's passage in the House and what it means as this bill moves forward to the Senate. One of the first areas of concern is that compromises necessary to get the Waxman-Markey bill passed in the House will make Senate passage more difficult. In particular, there were a number of compromises related to permits for firms that are energy intensive in their production to allow them to continue to operate before the full effect of Waxman-Markey comes in. Many people feel that this means that we'll be able to achieve much smaller reductions in greenhouse gas emissions by the scheduled timetable, raising the question, is it really worth it? At the same time, we still are adding significant costs to industry at a time when many people feel with a large economic recession we can ill afford them. So the impact of Waxman-Markey on the domestic economy and its compromised ability to achieve major reductions have many in the Senate worried that this bill is simply too costly with too little benefit on the other side. At the same time, some in the Senate are concerned that the Waxman-Markey bill as written will have a negative impact on our international relationships. Remember that at the end of November, beginning of December of this year, the United Nations-sponsored climate change talks will meet in Copenhagen, where President Obama is expected to lay out a U.S. position. Earlier in the year, many felt that if the United States came to Copenhagen with the Waxman-Markey bill or something like it significantly advanced their legislative process, this would give us additional credibility in working with our allies. It would show that for change, the United States was actually willing to act on climate change, not simply talk to others about what it might do in the future. But the prospect of the United States moving seriously on climate change has raised expectations around the world and affected the bargaining positions of some of our key allies. The Waxman-Markey bill is expected to achieve a 5% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions above their 1990 levels by the year 2020. The European Union and European Union countries had hoped that they would be able to get Western countries to commit to a 30% reduction over 1990 levels by the year 2020. With only a 5% reduction, the Waxman-Markey bill promises very disappointing gains, although, on the other hand, they are at least gains. Meanwhile, China, wary of the impact of climate change rules internationally on its ability to develop, has asked for even deeper cuts to Western emissions as a precondition for China entering into a global emissions reduction pact. This is problematic. China is clearly trying to raise the bar at the same time that the U.S. is falling short of even Europe's expectations. Many in the Senate will see that if we were to move towards a Copenhagen treaty, a treaty that the Senate would take the lead in ratifying, we might be better off in driving the debate at that level rather than having an insufficient Waxman-Markey bill complicate the potential for U.S. leadership at Copenhagen and beyond. There's one further issue that complicates discussions of Waxman-Markey, and that has been the effects of Henry Waxman, the chairman of the Senate Energy and Commerce Committee's amendment of the 2007 Energy Bill. This is an amendment that created something known as Section 526. The Section 526 amendment affects only U.S. government purchases of energy products, particularly fuel and petroleum, requiring that they be of a low-carbon standard. This has meant, for many of our allies, that high-carbon fuel, such as the oil sands from Canada, would be ineligible to be sold to the U.S. government. This provision was put into the bill very late in the legislative process. It was passed very quickly as an amendment, but raised a number of questions for other congressmen who later, looking at this provision, regretted that they had voted for it or that they had voted for the bill that contained this provision. Why? Because this includes a binding commitment against the U.S. military, which cannot buy high-carbon fuel. Now, at a time when the U.S. military is involved in a war and with the Obama administration reducing the Defense Department's budget, this puts our military, our soldiers in Afghanistan, Iraq, and operating around the world in places like Asia, where the U.S. Navy, using none other than petroleum products, sends ships to protect Hawaii in the event of a North Korean missile launch. Our military is under a squeeze because of these high carbon requirements, the low carbon requirement for their fuel. Many Blue Dog Democrats and mainstream Republicans have said that this kind of provision is a poison pill that really damaged the credibility of Chairman Waxman and this new legislation. The 2007 energy bill was 800 plus pages. The new Waxman-Markey bill, as it moves towards the Senate, is more than 1,000. You can bet that the Senate will look carefully for similar poison pills in this legislation. They'll want to make some changes of their own. They'll be wary about the international implications of what they're debating, and they may themselves decide that at a time when the economy is suffering, this is too expensive a fix that promises too little gain, and it would be better to return to the legislative drawing board and start over. My name is Christopher Sands. Thank you for listening.